Welcome back to BNG Hockey, where it's always black and gold. The Boston Bruins surprised the hockey world a few weeks ago when they fired head coach Bruce Cassidy. And after conducting plenty of interviews and taking forever to officially announce it, they have found their next head coach. Let's talk about it. The team officially announces Jim Montgomery as the 29th head coach in Bruins franchise history. We're going to take a look back at Montgomery's career in hockey so far. We'll talk a little bit more about my thoughts on the Bruins coaching search and their decision to fire Bruce Cassidy, and then I'll give you my thoughts on what Montgomery will bring to the Boston Bruins. Jim Montgomery has had a pretty impressive coaching career, but before that, he did play in the NHL. He played in a total of 122 games with quite a few teams. He played for the St. Louis Blues, the Montreal Canadiens, the Philadelphia Flyers, the San Jose Sharks, and the Dallas Stars. In those 122 games, he had 9 goals, 25 assists for a total of 34 points, and was a career -6. After a long successful run as head coach at the University of Denver, in which he had a total record of 125 wins, 57 losses, and 26 overtime losses, Montgomery got his first gig in the NHL as head coach of the Dallas Stars in the 2018-19 NHL season. He led that team all the way to the second round of the playoffs in his very first year, and it looked like in the 2019-20 season, he would lead his team to the playoffs once again. Unfortunately, though, he was let go during that season due to an alcohol addiction. He did go and get the help that he needed pretty quickly and was right back on track as he got hired by the St. Louis Blues the following season as an assistant coach. Even though his time in Dallas was short-lived, he had a pretty impressive record. In 114 games, he had 61 wins, 43 losses, and 10 overtime losses. And once he got hired by the St. Louis Blues, he was very impactful on that roster overall. Before I get into my thoughts on Montgomery specifically, I want to go back to the Bruce Cassidy firing. I said it then, I'll say it again, I just don't think Bruce Cassidy was the right guy to take the fall for the Bruins' failures this past season. And I didn't think coaching was a problem for the Boston Bruins. And when they fired Bruce Cassidy, I figured it was because they wanted to bring in someone big. A guy like a Barry Trotz who isn't always available, or even a big name like Pete DeBoer. He's not the best coach, but he's pretty well respected in the hockey world. Or maybe they just wanted to shake things up, maybe go a little bit younger, go with a guy like Jay Leach, who's still familiar with the system, but would change things up and bring a different look. And now that we know that Jim Montgomery is the coach, I don't hate it. I do think he's a different look than Bruce Cassidy, but I don't necessarily know if he's an upgrade over Bruce Cassidy, and it's still so confusing why you had a pretty good coach, he wasn't really the problem, and it seems like you just fired him because you needed to do something, not because you had a better coach available to you. And I felt like watching the Bruins make this coaching decision, even though they interviewed lots of candidates to make it seem like they had the best guy and really searched far and wide, I kind of feel like it was a game of musical chairs, and the Bruins were slowly running out of seats, and then they just picked one. And they might have ended up with a pretty good one. I think Jim Montgomery will actually do a pretty good job, and we're going to get into that shortly here. But I can't help but feel like the Bruins fired somebody just to fire somebody, started to go out and talk to all these people, realized that some guys weren't a perfect fit, or they were out on other guys because they took other jobs, and before they knew it, they just had to pick somebody, and Jim Montgomery was the guy. I hope that I'm wrong about that, but it did kind of seem that way with how chaotic it was and how long it took the Bruins to make this decision. I also want to mention, I was one of like 3 people who didn't hate the idea of David Quinn being the next head coach of the Boston Bruins. When he was mentioned as basically the only finalist, I was mentally prepared for him to be the guy. I like that he has a relationship with Charlie McAvoy, really respects his game, and I do think McAvoy needs to be played a lot more like a number 1. I don't think he necessarily was under Bruce Cassidy. This is a guy who should be close to 30 minutes a night, like the Roman Josis, the Victor Hedmans, and the Cale Makars, to take that next step and become a true number 1 Norris caliber defenseman. Not that he isn't already there. He was pretty high in Norris voting, and I think he's an absolute stud, but I think he can take it even further, and having a coach who already respects his game was something that I really liked. I also don't want my coach to be a total softie. That was one of the things I liked about Bruce Cassidy, but also sounds like it was one of the reasons why he was potentially let go. He was hard on some guys, especially young players. So David Quinn might have been the same way, but I didn't have a problem with Cassidy, so maybe that's why I like Quinn. But Quinn was also just a worse version of Cassidy, so I get why fans didn't love it. But like I said before, I didn't really want things to change, so maybe that's why I was okay with David Quinn. Now going to Jim Montgomery, I would definitely say it sounds like he's much more of a player's coach, which kind of concerns me a little bit. I don't want players being too comfortable, but also it could help players excel. It sounds like a lot of players have really enjoyed their time having Montgomery as their coach. Even as an assistant coach with the St. Louis Blues, he's been given quite a bit of credit with some of their young guys like Kyrou and Thomas, and a big part of why they had breakout seasons and were able to elevate their game. He listens to players, he helps put them in spots that are really best for them, not best for the system, so this could be a nice change in pace. And maybe having a guy who is a bit softer and a guy who is a bit more about the players and their feelings could be just what the doctor ordered for this Bruins roster, especially the young guys. It does sound like Bruce Cassidy was really hard on these guys, and it kind of hurt their game. I definitely can see that for guys like Jack Studnicka, Trent Frederick, Jake DeBrusk, even a Brandon Carlo. Sometimes they just weren't put in the best spot for success, and I think having a fresh start for everybody could be just what this team needs. I also expect to see a pretty big system change. I don't think the Bruins will throw out their defensive style entirely, but I do expect them to be a bit freer, a bit more creative, because I think that's what Montgomery allows, being a player's coach. It's okay if you go out there and make mistakes, and I think that young guys and the Bruins as a whole will thrive under Montgomery. Even a guy like David Pastrnak could be even better in the offensive end, having a coach who's not so worried about structure and getting back and back checking and staying in the system no matter what. I think that will help the power play. He's known to be a power play guy, so I'm hoping to see more offense from the Bruins, and who knows, maybe a couple of the young guys pop under Montgomery who never would have got the chance or had the confidence under Bruce Cassidy. At the end of the day, I still don't believe this is an upgrade. I think how quickly Bruce Cassidy was snagged proves that. He's still one of the top coaches in the NHL, and I don't think Montgomery is there quite yet. I do think he potentially could be. He had a pretty good run in his first stint as head coach with Dallas. Unfortunately, it came to a pretty quick ending, but I do think he has the opportunity here to be one of the better stories this NHL season, and I'm excited to see that with the Boston Bruins. I'm also looking forward to seeing what Don Sweeney does the rest of this offseason and how this team will look coming into next season. And who knows, even though I don't think they needed a new coach, we have one. It will bring a lot of new things, and there's been plenty of times where a team gets a new head coach, the vets get sparked, some young guys get opportunities they wouldn't have, and next thing you know, the team's even better than we all thought. And I think it was looking a little bit doom and gloom heading into next season. It's definitely getting better now that it sounds like Bergeron could potentially be back, and now that we're switching things up with a new head coach. So maybe it might not be a lost season after all. So let me know your thoughts. What do you think of Jim Montgomery being the next head coach of the Boston Bruins? Were you hoping for somebody different? Do you just miss Bruce Cassidy? And what do you expect from Montgomery moving forward? Leave all that down below in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a big like, and if you haven't already, subscribe.